But for a Republican primary, you ought to know about that he's a big taxer. And then I think Mitt Romney's record has been rehashed many, many times in all the debates. You know, his challenge on where he was when he was running for the Senate and then for the governorship, and what his position was on right to life and what it was on immigration. And, well, I changed this, I changed this. I think they are seen as flip-floppers. And if they look at my record, I think people can see he stuck by his guns. And if you look back, there's appearing now some videos. You know that YouTube video? Boy, it picks up a lot of stuff. And every once in a while they pick some of those old videos up, and I sort of wish, I hope they don't show all of those. But you know, they do pick up the videos, and they show them that speeches I might have given 20 years ago on the Federal Reserve or different interviews on TV, and they'll come and say, you said exactly the same thing 20 years ago. So I think that is the difference, that people want somebody to keep their promises, they're consistent, and above all else, and I've talked about this so much, is a clear understanding of the Constitution, no lip service to the Constitution, a clear understanding and obedience to the Constitution.
Yes, sir. Go ahead. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Paul, and thank you for joining us today. My question is really two parts. One, the nation continuously runs very large trade deficits with quote-unquote trading partners such as Mexico and China and a lot of the Pacific Rim. What as a president would you propose to do with that, if anything? The other question is, you keep talking about a strong dollar and a dollar that's rooted in something other than what we have today. And I was wondering if you could just explain a little more clearly, since we're not in a 30-second soundbite, and let us know exactly where you're coming from on that.
Okay, and actually your two questions are interrelated, because it is the dollar system that helps hurt our trade imbalance. And we have a tremendous imbalance. Right now, for us to finance our extravagance, our consumption, our military operation, requires that we borrow over $800 billion every year. That's how much we spend and consume over and above what we produce. So literally, we could, and at times it looks like we might be held hostage by our banker. And the tragedy of all this, the mess that we have in our economy, is our banker now has become China, and Saudi Arabia, and Japan. And it has come across, because of the monetary system, something that motivated me to run for Congress many years ago, and the idea that we don't have anything backing our currency. Because of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the dollar was supposed to be as good as gold, and everybody trusted the dollar. The dollar became the reserve currency of the world. Instead of holding gold in the bank, they held dollars, and we were supposed to protect the value of the world currency. Well, that broke down in the 1970s. And then what happened was there was a threat to the dollar. We recovered from that in 1979 by having interest rates of 21% and restoring confidence. But somehow or another, the world was willing to accept this idea that the dollar was as good as gold. So we had the privilege of printing gold. In the gold standard, you can't print it, and you have to back off. You don't have any money. Like if you and I spent too much, there was a limit to how much we could spend, and countries had a limit. But this bizarre system came about where we were allowed to print as much money as we want, and the world was willing to take it. So our chief export became our dollars. So the jobs followed our dollars. And then, of course, we added to the mess by overtaxing and overregulating, and all of a sudden we were no longer competitive. And we had more inflation here. We were printing all these dollars, and because of the inflation, it was difficult to keep up with the price of labor and all the commodities. And this is all getting worse. You can't solve that problem until we live within our means. And we have to yield to this temptation to just keep borrowing. The country borrows as a whole. Our government borrows. We're deeply in debt. But we as individuals have done the same thing. The American people have $900 billion of credit debt. But that goes along with the debt in the banking system and in the financial markets as well as our country. you can't solve that problem until you deal with the currency itself. And this is the reason I talk about the Federal Reserve a lot and why we have to have a backing to the currency. We have to have the dollar convertible into something. This is what the founders knew and understood because of the runaway inflation of the continental dollar. And they said no more printing money, no more emitting bills of credit is what they talked about. The Constitution still says that. Only gold and silver can be legal tender. We as a nation cannot solve these problems until we restrain the paper machine. Now, what they would like to do is discredit me and others and you that would believe this and say, what do you want to do? Go back to the gold standard? Well, the question should be, is where did you get this notion that you can, if you come up when you need money, you just print it? I mean, that's the silliness of it all. They have to defend that position. So unless you deal with that and the tax system and the over-regulation, we are going to have difficulty. And then they came in and they started having some of these trade agreements which were supposed to adjust it. You know, the NAFTA and the CAFTA and the WTO, and it was all designed to have free and prosperous trade. They have served the interests of big corporations, and it hasn't been that fair, and it hasn't been that free market oriented. It will serve this special interest. So a lot has gone wrong, but you have to adjust all those events in order to get back. If we don't do the adjustment, what will happen is the dollar will keep going down. The dollar's on the rocks right now. People are starting to take notice. All of a sudden, the dollar is worth less than the Canadian dollar. So people are starting to realize that there's something special going on, and it's not insignificant. So the questions you ask have to be dealt with. One person can't do it. It needs the Congress. We need to change the law. We need to talk about monetary policy and change our tax code. But if we don't do it, we'll have a serious, serious problem. But that is exactly what we have to address.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Follen, you talk about the economy here with that gentleman's question. In today's Times in London, published in London, the headline said, living standards outstrip those across the Atlantic for the first time in over a century. That was in today's Times paper in London. The first paragraph, living standards in Britain are set to rise above those in America for the first time since the 19th century, according to a report by the respected Oxford Economics Consultancy. Your reaction to this?
This is exactly what we could predict it would happen. We've been living on borrowed money and borrowed time. The world finally got sick and tired of holding too many dollars and are dumping dollars. That means our cost of living is going up. Salaries may creep up a little bit. Wages might go up, and profits may go up, but it will never keep up. And people's standard of living is going down. And this is why even people under Social Security are suffering even with their 2% increases, because our government deceives us by saying, oh, there's no inflation, like there's only 2% inflation. But yet cost of living for the elderly, those on fixed income, are having inflation about 8 or 10%. And then we have this monetary system that goes and tells people who want to save money, saving is very important in a capitalist society. That's where capital comes from, not from the Federal Reserve System. So people who do try and save, if there are elderly that don't want to gamble in the stock market, which I don't blame them, and they start saving their money, and the Federal Reserve comes in and say, well, you're only going to get 2 or 3 or 4% on your savings, they can't keep up. And a characteristic of the destruction of a currency is the middle class gets wiped out. And look at the third world nations of the world. In Central America, even in Mexico, there's a small middle class. And this is what we're talking about today. And they're talking about this, our middle class being hurt. Low middle income and middle class really get hurt. And in the early stages, before there's real chaos, guess what? There's a certain class of people get wealthier. There's a transfer of wealth from the poor to the wealthy. And here just recently, at the end of the year, we had $38 billion of bonuses for companies on Wall Street. And I have no problems with companies that make money legitimately without government contracts and without milking the inflationary system. But the $38 billion is not part of free enterprise. It's very distorted. You have to suspect there's something wrong. When companies go bankrupt or they get in deep trouble and they have to fire their CEO and he gets a $300 million bonus for putting him out of office. There's something awfully strange going on. But that has a lot to do with the monetary policy, over taxes, over regulation, our production going down, our productive jobs are overseas. We are not producing the wealth. We are being drained, and it is related to our foreign policy because we still spend a lot of money, but we're spending $1 trillion a year to maintain our empire around the world.